The great hall of the Silver Moon Fortress echoed with boastful laughter and clinking goblets. Morgan Reed pressed herself deeper into the shadowed alcove, trying to disappear into the cold stone. Each burst of revelry felt like a physical blow against her skin. She was 20 years old and utterly alone in a room full of her own kind. The annual gathering of the 7 packs had transformed the usually austere fortress into a pageant of power, where alphas strutted like peacocks and betas vied for favor. Morgan, an omega without a wolf voice, was less than nothing here. She was a ghost at this feast, present only because her cousin Nathan had insisted. "Every member of the Silver Moon Pack will show their face tonight," he had snarled that morning, amber flashing in his eyes as dominance pheromones choked the air between them. "Even the broken ones." Broken. The word echoed in the hollow space where her wolf should have been. While others felt the warm, proud presence of their inner beast, Morgan felt only silence. A profound, unending silence that had haunted her since her first failed shift at 13. She remembered the pain, the contortions, the desperate reaching for something that refused to answer, the pitying glances afterward, the whispers that followed her still. Morgan's gaze drifted across the hall to where her sister Victoria held court among admirers. She was everything Morgan was not. Vibrant, confident, her beta wolf's presence a subtle but unmistakable aura that drew others like moths to flame. Victoria's golden hair caught the light of the massive chandeliers, her laughter musical as she responded to something a handsome beta from the Ironwood Pack had said. Not once during the entire evening had Victoria's eyes sought Morgan. Association with the wolfless Omega was a stain no one willingly bore, not even blood. A servant passed with a tray of wine. Morgan reached for a goblet, her fingers trembling slightly. The red liquid sloshed against crystal as she brought it to her lips. The bitterness matched her mood. From her hiding place, she surveyed the gathering that represented the pinnacle of wolf society. 7-pack alphas, dozens of high-ranking betas, all dressed in their finest. The Silver Moon Fortress, her home and prison, had opened its ancient gates to host the Grand Conclave, an honor that had fallen to them this year. Nathan, her cousin and alpha since the mysterious death of her father 6 years ago, had spent months preparing for this display of power and prosperity. Morgan smoothed the fabric of her simple gray dress. It was the finest thing she owned, yet alongside the silks and brocades adorning others, it marked her as clearly as a brand. Nathan had made sure of that. Her position as the disgraced daughter of Garrett Reed, once the pack's most legendary warrior, was a source of both shame and perverse pride to Nathan. See how magnanimous he was, keeping his invalid cousin fed and sheltered. See how strong the Silver Moon Pack was, that they could afford such charity. The bitter cold of shame washed through Morgan, a familiar companion. She sipped her wine and focused on the simple act of breathing, a technique she had perfected over years of enduring public humiliation. In and out, deep and steady, finding the quiet center within the vast emptiness inside her. It was in this emptiness, paradoxically, that she had discovered her only gift. Sometimes, when a pup was frightened or an elder in pain, Morgan could sit with them, and without explanation, a sense of peace would settle over them. Their muscles would relax, their breathing slow. They would thank her for her quiet company before forgetting her again. This small, secret magic of calm was her only power, useless in a society that valued tooth and claw above all. A hush fell over the great hall. Nathan strode to the center of the space, his powerful frame draped in the ceremonial fur cloak of the Silver Moon Alpha. 6 generations of Blackwood Alphas had worn that cloak. It should have been her father's, Morgan thought with a familiar pang. It should have passed to her brother, had she had one, but fate and Nathan's ambition had decreed otherwise. "Alphas of the 7 territories," Nathan's voice boomed, thick with false joviality. "Tonight we celebrate strength. Tonight we honor tradition. And tonight," his pause was theatrical, practiced, "we await the arrival of our sovereign lord, the Alpha King himself." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a complex mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation. The Alpha King. Alaric Stone, a monarch of mythic proportion who had clawed his way to the wolf throne over the bodies of his rivals 15 years ago. He was said to be more beast than man, his ferocity legendary, his cruelty boundless. Some said he could shift partially, maintaining human speech while sporting deadly claws and fangs. Others claimed he could maintain his wolf form for days, not mere hours like common shifters. Morgan's heart hammered against her ribs. No one had seen the Alpha King in person for nearly 3 years. He ruled from the Ravenclaw fortress in the northern mountains, his decrees delivered by grim-faced emissaries. His sudden decision to attend the conclave had sent shockwaves through the territories. What did it mean? Why now? The political implications were staggering. Through the crowd, Morgan caught Nathan's eye. A cruel smile played at the corners of his mouth as his gaze locked on her hiding place. Morgan's stomach twisted. She recognized that calculating look had been its target too many times before. Nathan was planning something, and somehow she was to be part of it. Another humiliation, no doubt. Another reminder of her place. The massive oak doors of the great hall groaned open. The crowd fell silent immediately, conversations dying mid-sentence. 2 royal guards entered first, their black armor seeming to swallow the torchlight rather than reflect it. They moved with the fluid grace of predators, making even the powerful alphas in the room look clumsy by comparison. Between them walked a figure who commanded the very air. Morgan's breath caught in her throat. Alaric Stone, the Alpha King. He was taller than any wolf shifter she had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of 7 territories. His hair was black as midnight, swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite. A jagged scar cut through his left eyebrow and down his cheek. A stark white line against tanned skin that spoke of violence survived. But it was his eyes that arrested Morgan's attention completely. Gray like a winter storm, they held no warmth, no mercy, only absolute authority as they swept across the assembled wolves. A collective gasp rippled through the hall as the full impact of the king's presence hit them. The pressure of his dominance was a physical force, a crushing weight that demanded submission. Every alpha, including Nathan, lowered their gaze. Every wolf, strong and proud, bowed their head in primal response to a predator of incomparable might. Morgan, hidden in her alcove, felt the force of his presence like a physical blow, but beneath the overwhelming dominance, she sensed something else, something fractured and raw beneath the iron control. Pain, immense chaotic agony so profound that she instinctively flinched, her own fragile calm shattering at mere proximity to such torment. She had never felt anything like it, had never imagined such suffering could exist within one being. It was a silent scream that no one else seemed to hear. The king moved to the high table, each step deliberate and dangerous. The subtle scrape of his ceremonial sword against his armor, the only sound in the hall. He did not sit, but stood behind the ornate throne-like chair reserved for him, his presence dominating the entire gathering. The silence stretched, thick with tension. No one dared speak. No one dared move. All waited for the Alpha King to pass judgment, to find them wanting, to unleash the legendary wrath that had built his kingdom. Morgan pressed herself harder against the cold stone, wishing she could phase through it. The pain emanating from the king was unbearable, yet she couldn't tear her attention away. There was something mesmerizing in his contained fury, something that called to the empty spaces within her. His cold gaze continued its methodical sweep, dismissing the powerful alphas as if they were nothing. He seemed to be searching for something, his expression a mask of grim impatience. Then, impossibly, his eyes paused on Morgan's alcove. Morgan's breath froze in her lungs. It was impossible. She was shrouded in shadow, insignificant, a mote of dust in a room of blazing fires. He couldn't have seen her. Yet she felt the weight of that penetrating gaze, felt it pierce through her carefully constructed shields. It was as if he had looked past her plain exterior and seen the strange silence within her. For the barest instant, the chaotic tempest inside him seemed to quiet, a moment of stillness in a hurricane. Then his gaze moved on, and the crushing pressure returned, perhaps even stronger than before. Nathan broke the suffocating silence, stepping forward with a deep bow. "My king," he said, his voice pitched to carry, "Silver Moon welcomes you to the conclave. We are honored by your presence." Alaric did not immediately respond, his expression unchanging. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, surprisingly quiet, yet carrying to every corner of the hall. "Nathan Blackwood," he said, the name sounding like judgment. "Your hospitality is noted." Just 4 words, yet they contained multitudes, neither praise nor condemnation, merely acknowledgement. Nathan's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "We have prepared a feast worthy of your Majesty's presence," Nathan continued, gesturing toward the laden tables, "and entertainment to follow, the finest our pack has to offer." Something in Nathan's tone sent a chill down Morgan's spine. The look he flashed toward her alcove confirmed her worst fears. Whatever entertainment he had planned involved her somehow. Morgan's fingers tightened around her wine goblet, her knuckles white with tension. The feast proceeded with strained formality. Alaric ate little, spoke less. The usual boisterous atmosphere of the conclave was muted by his overwhelming presence. Morgan remained in her alcove, forgotten by all except Nathan, whose occasional glances in her direction kept her anxiety at a steady simmer. When the tables were cleared, Nathan rose again, commanding attention. "My king, honored alphas," he began, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of prepared remarks. "As is tradition, each pack offers a demonstration of its unique strengths. Silver Moon is known for our warrior lineage, our tactical prowess." He paused, his smile turning cruel. "And for our honesty about our weaknesses." Morgan's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. "Among us lives a curiosity," Nathan continued, gesturing toward Morgan's alcove. "My cousin, Morgan Reed, daughter of the legendary Garrett Reed. Come forward, cousin. Let our guests see what becomes of even the strongest bloodlines when weakness takes root." All eyes turned to Morgan's hiding place. Escape was impossible. Refusal would only make the inevitable worse. With leaden feet and burning cheeks, Morgan stepped from the shadows into the torchlight. The crowd parted before her, some faces curious, others contemptuous, many simply uncomfortable at the blatant humiliation being orchestrated. "Morgan is what we call wolfless," Nathan announced, as if revealing a particularly interesting specimen. 20 years old, yet she has never shifted, never heard her wolf's voice. A true omega in the ancient sense, useless for fighting, breeding, or pack defense. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the older wolves crossed themselves in an ancient warding gesture. A wolfless shifter was considered an abomination by traditionalists, a cruel joke of nature. Morgan kept her gaze on the floor, her face burning with humiliation. "I keep her as a reminder," Nathan continued, circling Morgan like a predator, "that even the mightiest can fall. That weakness must be culled before it spreads." He turned to Alaric with a deep bow. "My king, I offer my cousin as entertainment. Perhaps your majesty would like to demonstrate the proper handling of such anomalies?" A terrible silence fell over the hall. Morgan raised her eyes, horror flooding through her. Nathan was offering her up for slaughter. Public execution as a spectacle. The ultimate humiliation of the Reed bloodline, which had once rivaled his own. But as her gaze met Alaric's, she saw not bloodlust, but a cold fury directed not at her, but at Nathan. The king's expression hadn't changed, but something in the set of his shoulders, the slight forward tilt of his stance, suggested barely contained violence. "You offer your bloodkin as sacrifice?" Alaric's quiet question cut through the silence like a blade. Nathan faltered, clearly not receiving the response he'd expected. "As demonstration, my king, of our pack's commitment to strength." Alaric stepped down from the dais, each footfall echoing in the silent hall as he approached. Morgan fought the urge to run, to hide. The king's presence was overwhelming at this distance, the pain emanating from him almost unbearable. Yet beneath it, she sensed something else now. Curiosity, perhaps. Interest. He stopped before her, towering over her slight frame. Morgan forced herself to meet his gaze, though every instinct screamed at her to show submission. Up close, she could see flecks of silver in his stormy eyes, could smell the strange wild scent of him, pine and smoke and something metallic. "Your name, Omega?" he asked, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Morgan Reed, Your Majesty," she whispered, surprised her voice worked at all. "Daughter of Garrett Reed," he stated rather than asked. Something shifted in his expression, too quickly for Morgan to interpret. "The Shadow Commander." Morgan blinked in surprise. No one had called her father by that title in years. It had been his designation in the last Great Pack War, before Morgan was born. How did the king remember such details? "Yes, Your Majesty," she confirmed, curiosity momentarily overriding fear. Alaric studied her face with unsettling intensity, as if searching for something. Whatever he found, or didn't find, caused him to make a decision. He turned back to face the crowd, his voice now pitched to Carrie. "Nathan Blackwood has offered a gift," he announced. "I accept." Nathan's triumphant smile spread across his face, but faltered as Alaric continued. "Morgan Reed will return with me to Ravenclaw Fortress." Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the hall. Morgan felt the blood drain from her face. Nathan stepped forward, confusion evident. "My king, perhaps I was unclear. The girl is wolfless, an embarrassment to—" "I understood perfectly," Alaric cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. "You offered your kin as entertainment. I find I am entertained by the prospect of her company at court." The implications hung in the air. Taking an unmarried female to court could mean many things, none of them particularly dignified for the female in question. Yet Morgan sensed something else beneath the king's words, some purpose beyond what the leering smiles of the alphas suggested. Nathan recovered quickly, bowing deeply. "Of course, my king. Silver Moon is honored by your interest in our resources." The way he emphasized the last word made it clear he considered Morgan nothing more than property, something to be used and discarded. Perhaps this was even better than his original plan. The shame of being the king's temporary plaything would follow Morgan forever. Alaric's expression remained impassive, but Morgan felt a spike in the pain emanating from him, a flash of rage quickly contained. "She will prepare for departure immediately. We leave at dawn." He turned and strode back to the high table, effectively ending the conversation. Morgan stood frozen in place, her mind whirling with shock and confusion. What had just happened? Why would the Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in 7 territories, take any interest in a wolfless Omega? A rough hand gripped her upper arm. Nathan leaned close, his voice a venomous whisper. "Seems you found your purpose at last, cousin. Warming the king's bed. Though I doubt even that will last long. He tires quickly of his toys." Morgan jerked her arm free, a rare act of defiance that surprised them both. "Better his toy than yours," she replied softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Nathan's eyes flashed amber, a growl building in his chest. For a moment, Morgan thought he might strike her, right there in the middle of the feast. But a heavy hand landed on Nathan's shoulder. General Magnus, the king's head of security, stood there, his expression neutral, but his intent clear. "The king suggests you help your cousin prepare for tomorrow's journey," Magnus said, his tone making it clear this was no suggestion. Nathan forced a smile, inclining his head. "Of course. Family duty." He grabbed Morgan's arm again, less roughly but no less possessively, and led her from the great hall. As they passed the high table, Morgan risked a glance at Alaric. The king wasn't looking at her, but at Nathan, his storm-gray eyes tracking them with the focus of a predator marking prey. A shiver ran down Morgan's spine, though whether from fear or something else, she couldn't say. In her chambers, small, plain rooms befitting her status, Morgan found Victoria waiting. Her sister paced the worn carpet, an unusual display of agitation for someone normally so composed. "Is it true?" Victoria demanded without preamble. "Has the king claimed you?" Morgan sank onto her narrow bed, the events of the evening catching up with her. "Claimed is a strong word. He's taking me to Ravenclaw Fortress. Beyond that, I know nothing." Victoria ran a hand through her golden hair, disheveling her careful styling. "This is a disaster, or an opportunity. I'm not sure which." "Nathan seems to think the former. Morgan observed dryly, beginning to gather her few possessions. There wasn't much: some clothes, a small wooden box containing her mother's silver hairbrush, a worn leather journal that had belonged to her father. "Nathan is a fool," Victoria said sharply, then glanced toward the door as if worried about being overheard. She lowered her voice. "No one gets close to the Alpha King. No one. Not his advisors, not his generals. There are rumors." Morgan looked up from her packing. "What rumors?" Victoria hesitated, then sat beside Morgan, their shoulders almost touching, the closest they'd been in years. "They say he's changed, that something happened 3 years ago when he retreated from public life. Some say he's ill, others say he's been cursed." "Cursed?" Morgan repeated, remembering the overwhelming pain she'd sensed from him. "By whom?" "No one knows, but the emissaries who return from Ravenclaw speak of strange noises in the night, of servants who disappear, of rooms in the fortress that are forbidden to enter." Victoria gripped Morgan's hand suddenly, her expression intense. "You need to be careful, little sister. For all your limitations, you've always seen things others miss, felt things others ignore. That sensitivity might keep you alive in that place, or it might get you killed." Morgan stared at her sister, shocked both by the warning and the evident concern behind it. "I thought you'd forgotten I existed," she said quietly. "You haven't spoken more than 10 words to me in public for years." Victoria's expression softened, guilt flashing across her features. "I couldn't. After Nathan took control, after Father..." She swallowed hard. "Someone had to maintain position, to have a voice in pack decisions. I couldn't do that and acknowledge you, not without risking everything." "Everything for whom?" Morgan asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "For both of us," Victoria insisted. "Nathan would have thrown you out years ago if I hadn't negotiated your place. Where do you think a wolfless Omega would end up alone in the territories? Dead in a ditch, or worse?" Morgan wanted to be angry, to hold on to the years of perceived abandonment, but she sensed the truth in her sister's words. Victoria had played a long, careful game in the dangerous politics of pack hierarchy, and now that game was changing. "What should I do?" Morgan asked finally, feeling younger than her 20 years. "At Ravenclaw?" Victoria squeezed her hand, then released it. "Watch. Listen. Learn who holds real power there, and whatever you do, don't show fear. Wolves, especially alphas, can smell it." She paused, her expression troubled. "And if the king, if he expects you to serve him..." "I'll manage," Morgan cut her off, not wanting to discuss that particular possibility. Victoria nodded, then reached into the small pouch at her belt. She withdrew a delicate silver chain with a crescent moon pendant. "Take this. It was Mother's. I've kept it safe for you." Morgan accepted the necklace with trembling fingers. Their mother had died when she was just 4, leaving only hazy memories of soft hands and a gentle voice. The pendant was warm from Victoria's body, the silver catching the lamplight. "Thank you," she whispered, slipping it over her head and tucking it beneath her dress. Victoria stood, composing herself, the brief moment of sisterly connection already fading as she resumed her beta demeanor. "I'll send Marta to help you pack. You should rest. Tomorrow will be challenging." After Victoria left, Morgan sat alone in the quiet of her chamber, fingers tracing the outline of the pendant beneath her clothes. Beyond the window, the fortress hummed with activity as the conclave continued without her. By tomorrow, her life would change irrevocably. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Sleep eluded Morgan that night. She lay awake, replaying the moment the king's eyes had found her in the alcove, the strange connection she'd felt, the overwhelming sense of his hidden pain. What awaited her at Ravenclaw? Why had he chosen her of all people? What value could a wolfless Omega possibly have to the most powerful alpha in the territories? As dawn approached, Morgan rose and dressed in her traveling clothes, sturdy wool pants, a simple linen shirt, leather boots that had seen better days. Practical attire for the journey north. She braided her chestnut hair tightly, securing it at the nape of her neck. The woman who gazed back at her from the small looking glass appeared older somehow, her green eyes holding a determination that surprised even her. A knock at her door announced Marta, the elderly beta servant who had been one of the few kind presences in Morgan's life at Silver Moon. She carried a small pack with provisions and a heavy wool cloak lined with fur. "For the northern mountains," she explained, helping Morgan secure the cloak. "The king's party awaits in the courtyard. Nathan is indisposed this morning." Morgan understood the implication. Her cousin, humiliated by the king's unexpected actions, had chosen not to see her off. It was just as well. She had nothing to say to him. As Morgan followed Marta through the fortress corridors, a strange sensation began to build in her chest. With each step toward the courtyard, toward the king, toward her unknown future, a whisper seemed to stir in the emptiness inside her. Not words, not quite a voice, but something awakening. In the gray light of dawn, the king's retinue presented an intimidating sight. 20 royal guards in black armor, mounted on massive war horses, supply wagons, and at the center, Alaric Stone himself, astride a midnight stallion that pawed the cobblestones impatiently. The king wore no crown, only a simple circlet of silver that gleamed against his black hair. His riding leathers and cloak were also black, unadorned except for the royal crest, a wolf with a crown, embossed on his vambraces. Morgan hesitated at the entrance to the courtyard, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what was happening. She was leaving the only home she'd ever known, with a man reputed to be more monster than human, to a fortress shrouded in mystery and fear. "You're afraid." The deep voice startled her. The king had dismounted and approached without her noticing, moving with that uncanny silence that marked apex predators. Morgan straightened her spine, remembering Victoria's advice. "Yes, Your Majesty." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, there and gone in an instant. He had expected denial, perhaps. "At least you're honest," he said. "Fear is natural. Hiding it is foolish." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Standing this close, Morgan could again sense the strange, chaotic pain within him, barely contained beneath his stoic exterior. It radiated from him in waves that made her own chest ache in response. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked suddenly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "What's broken inside me?" Morgan's eyes widened. How could he know? I sense something, Your Majesty. Pain." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "Interesting. Get on your horse. We've delayed enough." He turned abruptly and strode back to his stallion, leaving Morgan staring after him in confusion. A young beta guard approached, leading a dappled mare. "For you, miss," he said, offering a hand to help her mount. The journey north began in silence. Morgan rode near the center of the formation, the king far ahead, General Magnus close behind. As Silver Moon Fortress receded into the distance, Morgan felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. She was leaving behind a life of humiliation and constraints, yet heading toward complete uncertainty. They rode through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take quick meals of hard cheese and dried meat. The territories changed around them, the cultivated fields of Silver Moon giving way to wilder forests, and finally the foothills of the northern range. Few words were spoken. The king's guards maintained a vigilant watch, their discipline evident in every movement. As twilight approached, they made camp in a sheltered valley. Tents were erected with military efficiency, a perimeter established, watches set. Morgan was assigned a small tent near the king's much larger pavilion. As she settled onto her bedroll, exhaustion from the long ride overtaking her, that strange whisper in her chest returned, stronger now. She placed a hand over her heart, feeling it beat steady and strong beneath her palm. What was happening to her? Was it proximity to the king, the unknown magic of his overwhelming presence, or something else entirely? Before sleep claimed her, a memory surfaced. Her father, kneeling before her on her 10th birthday, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes intent on hers. "There will come a time, little wolf," he had said, using the endearment that had always seemed so cruelly ironic, "when you will hear your true voice. Not the voice others expect, not the voice the pack demands, Your true voice. When that happens, remember everything I've taught you." At the time, Morgan had assumed he meant the voice of her wolf, the one that never came. Now, on the edge of sleep, in unfamiliar territory with the most dangerous man in 7 packs just yards away, she wondered if her father had meant something else entirely. Morning came with a light mist rising from the valley floor. The camp was already bustling when Morgan emerged from her tent. The king stood with General Magnus and 2 other officers over a map spread on a portable table, discussing the day's route. As if sensing her gaze, Alaric looked up, his eyes finding hers across the camp. A jolt of something, recognition, awareness, passed between them before he returned his attention to the map. Morgan helped where she could with breaking camp, though it was clear the king's retinue operated with practiced precision that required little assistance. Soon they were riding again, climbing steadily into the mountains. The terrain grew more challenging, the air cooler and thinner. Around midday, as they navigated a particularly treacherous mountain path, a cry went up from the lead scouts. "Ambush!" Morgan barely had time to register the warning before chaos erupted. Arrows whistled through the air. Her horse reared in panic. Strong hands grabbed her, pulling her from the saddle before she could fall. It was the young Beta guard who had helped her mount the previous day. "Stay down!" he shouted, pushing her against the rocky mountainside as he drew his sword. Through the confusion of shouting men and panicking horses, Morgan saw them, rogues, wolves without pack allegiance, notorious throughout the territories as bandits and murderers. At least 20 of them swarmed down the mountainside, armed with crude weapons but moving with the coordinated precision of experienced killers. The king's guards formed a defensive perimeter, their training evident in their immediate response. But the narrow path limited their movement, gave the advantage to attackers who knew the terrain. Morgan pressed herself against the rocks, trying to make herself as small a target as possible. Then she saw him. Alaric. The king had dismounted and now stood in the center of the path, facing the oncoming rogues. As Morgan watched, a change came over him. His shoulders broadened impossibly. His hands curled into clawed shapes. A sound emerged from his chest. Not quite human, not quite wolf. A roar that shook loose stones from the mountainside. The rogues faltered, clearly not having expected to face the Alpha King himself. But their hesitation lasted only moments before their leader urged them forward with guttural shouts. They charged, weapons raised. What happened next seared itself into Morgan's memory forever. Alaric met the charge not with sword, but with claw and fang. A partial shift, the legendary ability to maintain human form while manifesting wolf attributes. His movements were blindingly fast, inhumanly powerful. 3 rogues fell in as many seconds, their throats torn out with surgical precision. Blood sprayed across the rocky path. But it wasn't the violence itself that transfixed Morgan. It was the change that overcame the king as the battle progressed. The partial shift began to slip. Black fur sprouted along his arms. His face elongated slightly, taking on aspects of a muzzle. Most disturbing were his eyes, no longer stormy gray but glowing amber, then shifting to a deep, unnatural crimson. The pain she had sensed within him flared like a bonfire, raging out of control. This was no controlled partial shift. This was something else, something wrong. The king's guards fought with disciplined precision around their monarch, but they too seemed alarmed by his transformation. General Magnus shouted orders, trying to form a protective circle around Alaric, who now fought with increasing ferocity and decreasing control. A rogue broke through the perimeter, charging directly toward where Morgan huddled against the rocks. She had no weapon, no defense. The wolfless Omega was about to die on a mountainside, far from home, without ever understanding why she had been brought here. Time seemed to slow. The rogue raised his axe. Morgan raised her hands in futile defense, and deep inside her, in that hollow space where her wolf should have been, something answered her terror. Not a voice, not a presence, but a surge of something else. Energy, purpose. Without conscious thought, Morgan lowered her hands from defensive position to open-palmed gesture. A strange calm flowed through her, replacing fear with certainty. When the rogue was just 3 paces away, she pushed that calm outward, toward him, like extending an invisible hand. The effect was immediate and shocking. The rogue stumbled, his expression changing from bloodlust to confusion. His muscles relaxed involuntarily. The axe slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. He sank to his knees before her, eyelids drooping, as if overcome by irresistible drowsiness. Morgan stared at her hands, then at the incapacitated rogue, disbelief warring with dawning comprehension. She had done this. Somehow, she had projected the calming influence she had occasionally used with distressed pups and elders, but with far greater intensity. A bestial roar recaptured her attention. The king had dispatched at least 8 rogues himself, but his transformation continued to progress. Plates of what looked like black armor were forming along his spine, pushing through his shredded clothing. His hands were now fully clawed, his teeth elongated into fangs too large for a normal wolf shift. He fought with decreasing coordination but increasing strength, attacking friend and foe alike in his frenzy. "The curse takes him!" shouted General Magnus, narrowly avoiding a swipe from his king's claws. "Fall back!" The guards retreated, forming a wider circle, uncertain how to proceed. The remaining rogues, seeing the king's berserker state, were also falling back, some turning to flee. The standoff might have continued, except Morgan found herself moving forward, drawn by an instinct she didn't understand. "Miss Reed, no!" The young beta guard tried to stop her, but she slipped past him. Morgan approached the transformed king cautiously, but without hesitation. The pain emanating from him was now a visible aura, a distortion in the air around his hulking form. He turned toward her, crimson eyes locking on her approaching figure. A growl built in his chest, warning her away. Morgan didn't stop. She kept her hands visible, her movements slow and deliberate. The strange calm that had overcome the rogue now flowed through her continuously, a current of cool energy that seemed to gather in her palms. "Your Majesty," she said softly. "Alaric, you're in pain." He snarled, taking a menacing step toward her. The guards tensed, ready to intervene, though clearly uncertain how to protect her without harming their king. Morgan took a deep breath, then reached out, not touching him yet, but extending her hand palm forward. "Let me help you," she said, her voice stronger now. "Let me ease it." For a terrible moment, she thought he would strike her down, his massive frame coiled with tension, claws flexing. But something in her words, or perhaps her demeanor, gave him pause. The crimson eyes flickered, gray momentarily visible beneath the unnatural glow. Moving with infinite care, Morgan closed the distance between them and placed her palm against his chest, directly over his heart. The touch completed a circuit. Energy flowed from her into him, that strange, calming influence, but magnified beyond anything she had experienced before. The chaotic maelstrom of his pain met the cool stream of her peace. A shudder ran through the king's massive frame. The black armor-like plates receded slightly. The crimson glow in his eyes dimmed, gray emerging more prominently. His breathing, which had been ragged and strained, began to even out. "That's it," Morgan encouraged quietly, maintaining the contact. "Find your center. Find your control." Gradually, the transformation reversed. The muzzle receded. Claws retracted into human nails. The black fur disappeared. Within minutes, Alaric Stone stood before her in human form once more, his clothing torn and bloody, his expression a mixture of shock, relief, and wariness. Morgan swayed on her feet, suddenly lightheaded. Whatever she had done had drained her considerably. The king caught her elbow before she could fall, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands that had been dealing death minutes before. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Morgan shook her head, trying to clear the fog that threatened to overwhelm her. "I don't know. I just felt what needed to be done." Around them, the king's guards maintained a wary perimeter, dealing with the few remaining rogues who hadn't fled. General Magnus approached cautiously, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. The king, restored to human form, supporting the wolfless Omega, who by all rights should have been cowering in terror. "Your Majesty," Magnus said, his tone carefully neutral, The path is clear ahead. We should move before more rogues appear. Alaric nodded, his gaze never leaving Morgan's face. See to it. And General, what happened here remains among those present. Is that clear? Yes, Your Majesty. Magnus bowed and withdrew to organize the continuation of their journey. Still supporting Morgan's elbow, Alaric led her to where their horses were being calmed by the royal handlers. His expression was guarded, but the pain she had sensed in him since their first meeting had subsided to a dull throb rather than the raging inferno of before. You saw, he stated, rather than asked, his voice pitched for her ears alone. The transformation? Morgan nodded. Yes, it's not a normal shift. A bitter smile touched his lips. No, not normal at all. It's why I brought you to Ravenclaw. Morgan's confusion must have shown on her face, because he continued, Your father wrote to me 6 years ago, just before his death. He claimed his daughter possessed a unique ability, one that might be of interest to someone suffering from my condition. My father? Morgan repeated, stunned. He knew about your condition? About me? Garrett Reed knew many things, Alaric replied grimly, including, I suspect, who was behind his death. Before Morgan could process this revelation, the king turned to assist her onto her mare. As she settled into the saddle, still weak from her exertion, he looked up at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. You calmed the beast, he said quietly. No one has ever done that before. Morgan nodded, uncertain how to respond. The question is, he continued, can you tame it completely? Because if you can't, Morgan Reed, daughter of the Shadow Commander, then I fear your time at Ravenclaw will be very brief indeed. With that ominous statement hanging in the air between them, Alaric returned to his stallion. The journey resumed, though now Morgan rode directly behind the king, upgraded in status from baggage to person of interest. As the path wound higher into the mountains, that strange whisper in Morgan's chest grew stronger. Not a wolf's voice, but something older, something that had been waiting for this moment. Her father's words echoed in her memory. When you hear your true voice, remember everything I've taught you. What had Garrett Reed known? What had he taught her in those private lessons disguised as father-daughter time? The combat training, ostensibly to help her compensate for her lack of wolf strength. The meditation techniques, supposedly to help her deal with the pack's rejection. The history lessons, focused oddly on ancient pack wars and forgotten bloodlines. Had it all been preparation for this moment? For meeting a king cursed with a monstrous second nature? For leaving behind the pack that had never truly accepted her? As they crested a ridge, Ravenclaw Fortress came into view, its ancient stone towers rising from the mountainside like they had grown there naturally. Morgan's breath caught at the sight. This imposing structure would either become her sanctuary or her tomb. The whisper inside her chest became a hum, a vibration of recognition. Something waited for her within those walls, something that would change everything she thought she knew about herself, about her father, about the wolfless silence that had defined her life. Morgan straightened in her saddle, eyes fixed on the fortress ahead. Whatever awaited her there, she would face it with the same quiet strength that had sustained her through years of rejection and humiliation. She was Morgan Reed, daughter of the Shadow Commander, and for the first time in her 20 years, she felt the stirring of purpose. Alaric turned in his saddle, his stormy eyes finding hers across the distance between them. For a brief moment, the mask slipped, and she saw in his face a desperate hope that matched the desperate fear. He needed her. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in 7 territories, needed a wolfless Omega. The irony was not lost on Morgan. She allowed herself a small smile as she urged her mare forward, toward Ravenclaw, toward destiny. Ravenclaw Fortress loomed against the darkening sky, ancient stone towers rising from the mountainside like the fangs of a slumbering beast. Morgan Reed stood at the window of her assigned chamber, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the distant peaks in shades of blood and gold. 3 days had passed since their arrival. 3 days of uncertainty, of whispered rumors among the servants, of wary glances from the royal guards. 3 days in which she had not seen the Alpha King, The chamber itself spoke volumes about her ambiguous status. Located in the North Tower, it was spacious and well-appointed, with heavy tapestries depicting ancient pack wars, a four-poster bed draped in furs, and a private bathing chamber, luxuries far beyond what she had known at Silver Moon. Yet guards stood at her door day and night. Not for protection, she suspected, but to ensure she remained where she could be found when needed. Morgan traced her fingers along the stone windowsill, feeling the centuries of history embedded in the cold granite. What secrets did these walls hold? What had brought her father here years ago, and what had he discovered that ultimately led to his death? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Without waiting for a response, an elderly female beta entered, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, her posture ramrod straight despite her years. She carried a stack of folded garments over one arm. "I am Eleanor," she announced without preamble, "Royal Librarian and Keeper of Records." Her sharp eyes assessed Morgan with unsettling thoroughness. "You look like him." Morgan blinked in surprise. "Like who?" "Garrett Reed, the Shadow Commander." Eleanor placed the clothes on the bed with careful precision. "He spent many hours in my library during his time here, always searching, always questioning." Morgan's pulse quickened. Here was someone who had known her father, perhaps known his secrets. "You knew him well?" "Well enough." Eleanor's expression softened momentarily. "He spoke of you often. His little wolf, he called you." She gestured to the clothes. "These were his. I thought they might fit you." Morgan approached the bed, running her fingers over the garments. Simple linen shirts, leather vests, sturdy pants. Practical clothes for a warrior, not an ornamental omega. "Why would you think I'd want these?" Eleanor's thin lips curved in something not quite a smile. "The king has requested your presence at dinner tonight. Wear what you wish, but know that in Ravenclaw, appearances often deceive." With that cryptic statement, she turned to leave, pausing at the door. "The North Tower has always housed the king's most trusted advisors. Your father's quarters were these very rooms." The door closed behind her, leaving Morgan alone with this revelation. Her father's rooms. She looked around with new eyes, trying to sense some lingering trace of him in these stone walls. Why had Nathan never mentioned this? Why had no one told her of her father's close connection to the royal court? She opened the wardrobe, finding more conventional female attire, fine gowns suitable for an omega at court. The choice before her was symbolic: present herself as the docile omega everyone expected, or honor her father's memory in his own clothes, signaling something altogether different. Morgan made her decision quickly. She bathed, then dressed in her father's garments, black pants, a gray linen shirt, and a dark blue leather vest that hung slightly loose on her slender frame. She braided her chestnut hair tightly back from her face. The woman who stared back from the looking-glass appeared stronger, more determined than the meek omega who had cowered in Silver Moon's shadows. Around her neck, Victoria's parting gift gleamed, their mother's silver crescent moon pendant, a reminder of family bonds that transcended pack politics. The same young beta guard who had protected her during the ambush arrived to escort her to dinner. He introduced himself as Daniel, his manner respectful but wary. As they descended the winding stone stairs of the North Tower, Morgan noticed how the other residents of the fortress reacted to her presence. Curious glances, whispered comments, a few hostile stares from high-ranking betas. The Great Hall of Ravenclaw was a marvel of ancient architecture, its vaulted ceiling supported by massive stone columns carved to resemble ancient wolves. Hundreds of candles in iron chandeliers cast flickering light over the assembled court, royal advisors, military officers, visiting dignitaries. At the far end, a raised dais held the royal table, where Alaric Stone sat in solitary splendor. Conversation halted as Morgan entered. All eyes turned to assess the wolfless omega from Silver Moon, now dressed like a warrior's son rather than a submissive female. Morgan kept her chin high, her steps measured, as Daniel led her through the crowd toward the dais. Alaric's expression revealed nothing as she approached, but something flickered in his storm-gray eyes. Perhaps surprise, perhaps approval. He wore no crown, only the simple silver circlet she had seen before. His black hair was pulled back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face and the white scar that cut through his eyebrow and down his cheek. "Morgan Reed," he acknowledged, his deep voice carrying in the suddenly silent hall. "Join me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Daniel escorted her to the empty chair at the king's right hand, a position of honor typically reserved for trusted advisors or honored guests, never for an Omega. General Magnus, standing behind the king's chair, narrowed his eyes at the sight of her in Garrett Reed's clothes. The message was not lost on him, nor on the court. Morgan took her seat, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes tracking her every movement. Alaric signaled for the feast to begin. Servants appeared with platters of roasted game, forest vegetables, and fresh bread. Wine flowed freely, loosening tongues and relaxing the formal atmosphere. Yet Morgan noticed that Alaric drank only water from a silver goblet. "The clothes suit you," Alaric said quietly, his words for her alone as the din of conversation provided cover. "Your father wore them when he trained with my guards." Morgan's fingers tightened on her own goblet. "How well did you know him?" "Well enough to trust him with my life," Alaric replied, cutting into the venison on his plate with precise movements. "And well enough to suspect foul play when news of his death reached me." "Yet you did nothing," Morgan said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Alaric's jaw tightened. "I was indisposed at the time. The curse had taken stronger hold." His eyes met hers, steel gray and unflinching. "But I never forgot, nor forgave." Before Morgan could respond, General Magnus approached the table, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, the scouts have returned from the western border." Alaric nodded, his attention diverted to matters of state. Throughout the remainder of the meal, Morgan observed the court dynamics, noting which advisors commanded attention, which were ignored. Two figures in particular stood out: a striking female alpha with silver blonde hair, who alone among the court wore ceremonial armor to dinner, and a smooth-faced man in rich robes who watched the proceedings with calculating eyes. "Lady Freya of the Eclipse Pack," Daniel murmured, when he noticed Morgan's interest in the female alpha. The only female alpha in the 7 territories, and beside her, Lord Declan, the king's chief political advisor, both powerful, both dangerous in their own ways. As the meal concluded, Alaric rose. The hall fell silent immediately. "Tomorrow marks the Blood Moon Festival," he announced, his voice filling the vast chamber without effort. "As tradition dictates, we will honor our ancestors with the ritual hunt at dawn. All alphas and ranking betas will participate." His gaze swept the assembly, then settled on Morgan. "Tonight, I require Morgan Reed's presence in the royal study. The rest of you are dismissed." Fresh murmurs erupted as Alaric strode from the dais. Morgan rose to follow, feeling the weight of speculative stares. Lord Declan watched with barely concealed interest, while Lady Freya's expression remained impassive, assessing. Daniel escorted Morgan through labyrinthine corridors to a massive oak door guarded by 2 royal sentries in black armor. They opened the door without question, revealing a circular room lined with bookshelves from floor to ceiling. A fire blazed in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across ancient tomes and scrolls. Maps covered one wall, marked with notations in a precise hand. Alaric stood before the fire, his broad shoulders outlined by the flames. He dismissed Daniel with a nod, leaving Morgan alone with the Alpha King. "Your father spent many nights in this room," Alaric said without turning. "Planning strategies, analyzing threats, protecting the kingdom." He gestured to a worn leather chair near the fire. That was his favorite seat. Morgan approached slowly, running her fingers over the chair's arm, imagining her father sitting here, alive and strong. The leather retained the imprint of years of use. "Why am I here?" she asked finally. "What do you want from me?" Alaric turned, the firelight casting half his face in shadow. "A cure." He rolled up the sleeve of his tunic, revealing a network of black veins spreading up his forearm, pulsing slightly beneath the skin. "The curse advances. Your touch calmed it temporarily, but already it grows stronger. If I cannot control it soon, I will lose myself entirely." Morgan stared at the black veins, understanding dawning. "The armor-like plates during your transformation. This is where they begin." Alaric nodded grimly. "It started 3 years ago. A small patch that appeared after a particularly difficult full moon shift. At first I thought nothing of it. Battle scars are common among alphas, but it spread, and with it came the rage, the loss of control during transformation." "What caused it?" Alaric's expression darkened. "That is what your father was helping me discover before his death." His research led him to believe it was connected to an ancient conflict, the Night Eclipse War 2 centuries ago, when the Alphas united to destroy a tribe of wolves with unusual abilities. The Lunar Fall Tribe, Morgan whispered, the name rising from some deeply buried memory. Alaric's eyes sharpened. Yes, how do you know that name? Morgan shook her head, uncertain. I don't know. It just came to me. She frowned, trying to grasp the elusive memory. My father used to tell me bedtime stories about ancient wolf tribes with special gifts. I always thought they were just legends. They were real. Alaric moved to a shelf and removed a leather-bound journal. This was your father's. His notes on the Lunar Fall tribe and their connection to what he called soul wolves, wolves with the ability to heal or harm the spirit rather than the body. He handed her the journal. Morgan opened it with trembling fingers, recognizing her father's handwriting immediately. Diagrams, notes, and translations from ancient texts filled the pages. One passage had been underlined multiple times. The soul wolf bloodline persists even when dormant. The gift awakens in times of great need, often manifesting first as an unusual calm or healing presence. Those who cannot hear their wolf may still hear the souls of others. Morgan looked up, stunned. You think I'm a descendant of this tribe? That's impossible. I'm wolfless. Are you? Alaric challenged. Or is your wolf simply different? He sat in the chair opposite her, leaning forward intently. Your father believed you inherited something from your mother's bloodline, something rare and valuable, something that could counter the curse that afflicts me. My mother died when I was 4, Morgan said, her voice tight. I barely remember her. Elena Reed was not from the Silver Moon territories, Alaric revealed. Garrett met her while on a diplomatic mission to the far northern Pax. They fell in love, married quickly. Little was known about her family. The revelation struck Morgan like a physical blow. Another piece of her history hidden from her, another truth Nathan had suppressed. There's more, Alaric continued. Your father discovered that my curse is the result of a blood oath sworn by my ancestor during the Night Eclipse War. A vow to eliminate all soul wolves from the territories. Each successive Alpha King has inherited the burden of that oath. But as the soul wolf bloodline has diminished to near extinction, the curse has grown stronger, as if seeking to complete its purpose. And you believe I can break this curse? I believe you may be the key. The last of a bloodline thought extinguished, now sitting in the fortress of those who sought to destroy it. His eyes held a desperate intensity. The irony would not be lost on the ancient spirits. Morgan closed the journal, her mind reeling. Even if what you say is true, I have no idea how to access such power. I've spent my life being told I'm broken, incomplete. Which is precisely why Nathan kept you isolated and ignorant of your heritage, Alaric said, a growl entering his voice. He knew what you were, what you might become, and it terrified him. Morgan stood abruptly, pacing before the fire. This is madness. You expect me to believe I possess some mythical healing power? That I'm the last descendant of a slaughtered tribe? That I can somehow save the Alpha King himself? I expect you to consider the evidence before you, Alaric replied calmly. You calmed my beast form on the mountain pass, something no one has ever accomplished. You sense pain in others and instinctively ease it. You hear no wolf's voice because you're listening for the wrong sound. He rose, approaching her with deliberate steps. Tonight, I want you to read your father's journal. Tomorrow, after the blood moon hunt, Eleanor will take you to the ancient library beneath the fortress. There you'll find texts dating back to the founding of the wolf packs, including accounts of the soul wolves and their abilities. Morgan felt overwhelmed, caught between disbelief and a strange sense of recognition, as if some part of her had always known there was more to her silence than simple absence. And if I refuse, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, if I choose to return to Silver Moon, to the life I knew? Something dangerous flickered in Alaric's eyes, not anger, but fear. The curse advances more quickly now. Soon, I will lose control completely. When that happens, the beast will rule, merciless, unstoppable. He gestured to the maps on the wall, to the 7 territories marked in different colors. Thousands will die. The peace between packs will shatter, and you will never be safe. Nathan will eliminate you the moment you return, now that you know the truth of your heritage. The weight of his words settled over Morgan like a physical burden. She thought of Silver Moon, of Victoria, of the pack members who had never accepted her. Then she thought of her father. working in this very room to uncover ancient secrets, perhaps knowing all along what his daughter might someday face. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to read, to understand." Alaric nodded, relief evident in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. "Time is the one thing in short supply, but you will have tonight." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "One more thing. Trust no one completely, not even me. The curse changes me in ways beyond physical transformation, and there are those in court who would use you for their own ends." With that warning, he left her alone with the journal and her tumultuous thoughts. Morgan sank into her father's chair, the leather conforming to her body as if welcoming her home. She opened the journal again, tracing her fingers over her father's bold handwriting. She would read every word, absorb every clue, and then decide her path forward. Outside the study windows, clouds parted, revealing the nearly full moon, tomorrow's blood moon already tinged with ominous red. In the courtyard below, servants prepared for the festival, hanging lanterns and arranging ceremonial weapons. The ancient rhythm of wolf society continued, unaware that forces set in motion centuries ago were converging on this fortress, on this night, on the unlikely figure of a wolfless Omega who might be something else entirely. Morgan read deep into the night, absorbing her father's meticulous research. According to his notes, the Lunar Fall tribe had been nomadic, moving between territories, serving as healers and mediators among the more warlike packs. Their soul wolves never physically transformed, but could enter a trance state where they connected with the spirit realm. Some could ease pain and calm rage. Others could inflame emotions, or even, in rare cases, sever the connection between wolf and human, a punishment considered worse than death. Their power had threatened the authority of the Alphas, leading to the Night Eclipse War. The surviving members had scattered, concealing their abilities, intermarrying with conventional wolves until their bloodline became diluted, their gifts dormant. But Garrett Reed had discovered something crucial. Dormant did not mean extinct. Under certain conditions, extreme stress, mortal danger, proximity to ancient sites, the soul wolf gift could reawaken. And once awakened, it could be developed through specific rituals and training. The last page contained a personal note addressed to Morgan. "If you are reading this, my daughter, then my suspicions about Nathan proved correct, and I am gone. Know that everything I taught you, the combat training, the meditation techniques, the history lessons, was preparation for the legacy you carry. Your mother knew what you would face someday. Her dying wish was that I prepare you for the burden of your bloodline. Trust your instincts. Listen not with your ears, but with your soul. And remember that true strength lies not in dominance, but in healing. In your veins flows the blood of kings and healers both. When the time comes, you will know what to do." Dawn found Morgan still in the study, the journal closed in her lap, tears dried on her cheeks. A new resolve had hardened within her. Whether or not she could break Alaric's curse, she would uncover the truth of her heritage. She owed that much to her parents' memory. A knock at the door heralded Daniel, come to escort her back to her chambers before the hunting party assembled. The fortress was already alive with activity, alphas and betas preparing for the ritual hunt that would honor their ancestors and demonstrate their continued strength and dominance. From her tower window, Morgan watched the hunting party gather in the courtyard below. Alaric stood at their center, magnificent and terrible in ceremonial armor of blackened silver, a great bow strapped to his back. The alphas from each territory flanked him, including Lady Freya in her distinctive silver armor. Ranking betas, including General Magnus, completed the party. Lord Declan, Morgan noted, was conspicuously absent. Political advisors apparently exempt from displays of physical prowess. As if sensing her gaze, Alaric looked up toward her window. Their eyes met across the distance, an unspoken communication passing between them. He inclined his head slightly before turning to lead the hunting party through the fortress gates and into the wilderness beyond. Eleanor arrived as the hunters departed, bearing a tray with bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. "Eat," she instructed. "You'll need your strength for what's to come." Morgan complied, suddenly aware of her hunger after the night's revelations. "Tell me about the ancient library," she said between bites. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with scholarly enthusiasm. the greatest repository of wolf knowledge in all 7 territories, texts dating back to the first shifting, when humans first gained the ability to transform. Historical accounts, magical treatises, genealogical records. She lowered her voice, glancing toward the door. And forbidden knowledge, preserved despite numerous attempts to destroy it. Including information about the Lunar Fall tribe? Morgan asked. Eleanor's expression grew solemn. So you know. Good. There's little time for explanations. She moved to the window, watching the hunting party disappear into the forest. The blood moon hunt will keep most of the court occupied until sunset. We have until then to explore the archives safely. She led Morgan from the north tower, down through the main fortress, then deeper still, past the kitchens and storerooms, to ancient stairs carved directly into the mountain's bedrock. Torches provided the only illumination as they descended, the air growing cooler and heavy with the scent of old parchment and leather. At the bottom of the stairs stood a circular door of solid iron, marked with the wolf sigil of the royal house. Eleanor produced a heavy key from within her robes, turning it in a lock that opened with the groan of ancient mechanisms. Few know of this place, she said, pushing the door open. Fewer still have access. Your father was one. Now you are another. The library beyond defied Morgan's expectations. Not a dark, cramped cellar, but a vast cavern, illuminated by strange blue crystals set into wall sconces. Row upon row of wooden shelves held thousands of books, scrolls, and tablets. At the center stood a massive stone table, its surface carved with an intricate map of the territories as they had existed centuries ago. Before we begin, Eleanor said, closing the door behind them, you should know that I am more than the royal librarian. She straightened, her elderly frame suddenly seeming less frail, her eyes gleaming in the crystal light. I am the last initiated priestess of the lunar fall. Morgan stared, understanding dawning. You're a soul wolf. Eleanor nodded. One who has hidden in plain sight for 50 years, preserving what knowledge remains of our people. She approached Morgan, studying her face intently. When Garrett brought you here as a child, I sensed the potential in you immediately, but you were too young then for the burden of knowledge. You knew my father's plan to prepare me? I helped devise it, Eleanor confirmed. After your mother died, he brought you here secretly, seeking guidance. Together we determined that you must be trained gradually, subtly, lest Nathan or others discover your true nature. Her expression darkened. We did not anticipate Nathan's ambition would lead to Garrett's death. By the time I learned of it, you were already isolated at Silver Moon, beyond my reach. Morgan absorbed this revelation, pieces of her fragmented past finally connecting. And Alaric? Does he know what you are? He suspects, but has never asked directly. A wise king knows when ignorance serves better than knowledge. Eleanor moved to the stone table, running her fingers along its carved surface. Now, we must begin your true education. The ritual to awaken your soul wolf fully is complex and potentially dangerous, but without it, you cannot hope to counter the king's curse. She retrieved an ancient scroll from a nearby shelf, carefully unrolling it on the table. Faded illustrations depicted a female figure surrounded by concentric circles of symbols, arms outstretched toward a wolf-like shadow. The awakening ritual, Eleanor explained, traditionally performed under a blood moon when the veil between physical and spiritual realms thins. The timing of your arrival is no coincidence, Morgan Reed. Events have been set in motion that transcend mere politics or personal ambitions. Morgan studied the illustrations with growing apprehension. What exactly does this ritual involve? A spiritual journey, Eleanor replied. Your consciousness will separate partially from your body, allowing you to connect fully with your soul wolf. You will face trials, confrontations with fears, with past traumas, with the very nature of who you believe yourself to be. And the dangers? Eleanor's expression grew grave. Some initiates never return from the journey, losing themselves in the spirit realm. Others return changed in ways they never anticipated. The mind, once expanded to new dimensions, can never return to its former limitations. Morgan thought of her father's words in the journal. Trust your instincts. Listen with your soul. A lifetime of being told she was broken, deficient, had left deep scars. Yet beneath those wounds had always existed a quiet certainty that she was meant for something more. "If I succeed," she asked, "will I be able to heal Alaric's curse?" "Perhaps," Eleanor said. "The curse is ancient and powerful, bound to the royal bloodline through a blood oath. Breaking it may require more than healing. It may require transformation of both curse and carrier." Morgan traced the symbols on the scroll, feeling an inexplicable familiarity with their flowing shapes. "How soon can we perform this ritual?" "Tonight," Eleanor replied, "under the blood moon. But first, you must understand precisely what you'll be facing." She gestured toward a section of shelving nearly hidden in a shadowed alcove. These texts contain first-hand accounts of the Night Eclipse War and the true origin of the king's curse, knowledge that has been systematically erased from official histories. As Morgan approached the shelves, a distant sound echoed through the cavern, the fortress alarm bells signaling danger. Eleanor froze, head tilted toward the iron door. "Something is wrong," she whispered. "The hunting party should not return until sunset." The bells continued, their urgent pealing suggesting no mere ceremony but genuine emergency. Morgan felt a sudden, inexplicable tightness in her chest, a phantom pain that was not her own. "Alaric!" she gasped, understanding instantly. "The curse! Something's triggered it!" Without waiting for Eleanor's response, Morgan rushed toward the iron door, driven by an instinct beyond rational thought. As she raced up the ancient stairs, the phantom pain intensified, guiding her like a beacon toward its source. Behind her, Eleanor called warnings she could not heed. The fortress was in chaos, guards running to battle positions, servants seeking shelter. Morgan pushed through the confusion, following the pain's pull toward the main courtyard. There she found a scene of horror. The hunting party had returned early, carrying wounded. At its center lay Alaric, thrashing on the ground, partially transformed into the monstrous form she had witnessed on the mountain pass. Black armor-like plates covered most of his torso and one arm. His face contorted between human and bestial features, eyes flashing between stormy gray and blood red. General Magnus and 4 royal guards struggled to restrain him, while Lady Freya stood at a distance, bow drawn, and aimed at the king's heart. Blood soaked the ground beneath Alaric, his own and others. "What happened?" Morgan demanded, pushing through to Magnus's side. The general's face was grim, a fresh cut bleeding on his cheek. "Ambush. Rogues with poisoned weapons. The king took an arrow meant for Lady Freya, and the poison triggered the transformation." Morgan knelt beside Alaric's thrashing form, instinctively reaching toward him despite the danger. His red eyes locked on hers, recognition flickering briefly before being subsumed by bestial rage. "Don't touch him," Magnus warned. "He's too far gone. The poison accelerates the curse." Yet Morgan could not heed the warning. The connection between them, forged on the mountain pass, pulled her forward. Her palms began to glow with a subtle golden light, not visible to others, but apparent to her newly awakening senses. "Everyone back," she commanded, her voice carrying unexpected authority. Something in her tone made even Magnus hesitate before obeying. The guards followed his lead, stepping back while maintaining a defensive circle. Lady Freya kept her bow drawn but lowered its aim slightly. Morgan placed both hands on Alaric's chest, directly over his heart. The contact completed a circuit, her golden energy flowing into his corrupted form. But this time, the connection went deeper. Morgan felt herself drawn partially out of her physical body, into a twilight realm where spiritual energies manifested as visible auras. Alaric's aura was a chaotic storm of crimson and black, corrupted by centuries-old magic. At its core, she could see the curse, a writhing darkness wrapped around his soul like parasitic vines, feeding on his life force. The poison had accelerated its growth, pushing it toward a critical threshold. Without training, without the ritual Eleanor had described, Morgan had no idea how to counter such powerful dark magic. Yet instinct guided her. She reached with her consciousness into the tangled mass, seeking not to destroy the curse, but to understand it. Images flashed through her mind, ancient battles, a ritual sacrifice, a blood oath sworn over the bodies of slaughtered soul wolves. She saw Alaric's ancestor, the first Alpha King, drinking from a chalice filled with blood mixed with dark essence, binding himself and his descendants to the extinction of the Lunar Fall tribe. The curse was not merely a punishment, but a compulsion, driving each successive king to continue the hunt for surviving soul wolves. As their numbers dwindled, the curse grew more desperate, more destructive, twisting its carriers into the very monsters they had sworn to destroy. Understanding brought clarity. Morgan concentrated on the golden energy flowing from her hands, directing it not against the curse itself, but toward Alaric's core identity, strengthening his true self against the corrupting influence. She couldn't break the curse without the proper ritual, but she could help him reassert control temporarily. In the physical world, those watching saw only Morgan kneeling beside the king, her hands pressed to his chest, both figures unnaturally still amid the courtyard chaos. A minute passed, then two. Slowly, the black plates receded from Alaric's body. His features settled back into human form. His breathing steadied. When his eyes opened, they were his own storm gray again. They fixed on Morgan with an intensity that transcended words. He knew what she had seen, what she now understood about the nature of his burden. Morgan swayed, the effort of her untrained intervention draining her severely. As she started to collapse, Alaric caught her, their positions reversed from moments before. "Get them both inside," Magnus ordered the guards, "and find the royal physician, now." As consciousness faded, Morgan heard Eleanor's voice, somehow at her side despite having been left in the library. "The time for preparation is past," the old woman said urgently. "The blood moon rises tonight. We must perform the awakening immediately, or all is lost." Darkness claimed Morgan before she could respond, but not before she registered one final observation. Lord Declan, watching from a tower window, his calculating eyes narrowed in displeasure at her intervention. The political advisor had expected, perhaps hoped, for a different outcome to the hunting party's misfortune. In her dreams, Morgan heard the whisper of her soul wolf for the first time. Not a voice, but a presence, ancient and patient, waiting for her to complete the journey she had unknowingly begun years ago under her father's careful guidance. The blood moon was rising, the awakening approached, and the fate of 7 territories hung in the balance. Morgan awakened in an unfamiliar chamber, deep beneath Ravenclaw Fortress. Blue crystal light bathed stone walls inscribed with ancient symbols. The circular room held no windows, no furniture save the altar-like stone slab where she lay upon furs and silk. The air smelled of sage, pine, and something older, primal and wild. Her body ached, the after-effects of channeling untrained power to help Alaric in the courtyard. Each heartbeat pulsed with phantom pain, an echo of the connection they had shared. Morgan pushed herself upright, fighting vertigo as memories crystallized. The hunting party's return, Alaric's transformation, her instinctive intervention, the poisoned arrow. Lord Declan watching from the tower. "You're awake." Eleanor emerged from the shadows, carrying a silver chalice filled with steaming liquid. "Drink this. It will clear the fog and restore your strength." Morgan accepted the chalice, inhaling the herbal aroma. "Where are we?" "The Chamber of Awakening, hidden beneath the ancient library." Eleanor gestured to the symbols carved into the walls. For centuries, soul wolves came here to complete their training, to forge the final connection with their spiritual wolf. Morgan sipped the bitter liquid, warmth spreading immediately through her veins, clearing her mind with remarkable speed. "How long was I unconscious?" "Several hours. The blood moon will rise soon." Eleanor took the empty chalice, her expression grave. "Events accelerate beyond our control. The poison that struck Alaric was no common toxin, but a corruption agent specifically crafted to target the royal bloodline. Someone intended to trigger a complete transformation, to make him lose all control." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Assassination disguised as a hunting accident. A plot not just against the king, but against the fragile peace he maintained between the territories. "Alaric? Stable for now. Your intervention bought time, nothing more." Eleanor moved to the chamber's center, where a circle of silver inlay marked the floor. "The curse advances faster than before. By next moonrise he will transform completely, his humanity consumed. When that happens, the beast will reign unchecked, and thousands will die before the other alphas can bring him down." Morgan slid from the stone slab, testing her strength. "Then we perform the awakening ritual now." "Without proper preparation, the dangers multiply tenfold," Eleanor warned. "Your consciousness could be lost in the spirit realm. Your body could reject the full connection with your soul wolf. You could die, or worse, return only partially whole." "What choice do we have?" Morgan countered, standing straighter. My father prepared me my entire life for this moment, even when I didn't understand why. I won't fail his legacy now. A ghost of a smile crossed Eleanor's weathered face. You truly are Garrett's daughter. She approached Morgan, placing gnarled hands on her shoulders. Very well, but first, you must understand exactly what we face. She guided Morgan to the wall where the largest concentration of symbols formed a detailed mural. By the blue crystal light, Morgan recognized depictions of wolves in human form, surrounded by spiraling energy. At the center stood a female figure holding what appeared to be a silver sword, facing a monstrous beast with armor-like plates. The origin of the royal curse, Eleanor explained. 2 centuries ago, during the Night Eclipse War, the first Alpha King, Corvus Stone, led the campaign to eradicate the Lunar Fall tribe. Our people posed no threat. We were healers, mediators, scholars. But our connection to the spirit realm challenged Alpha authority, especially our ability to calm their rage, or, in extreme cases, sever the connection between human and wolf. Her finger traced the central image. The final battle occurred during a blood moon. The Alpha forces had already slaughtered most of our tribe, but the High Priestess, Selene, remained. Rather than fighting, she offered Corvus a challenge, single combat, not of physical strength, but of spiritual power. What happened? Morgan asked, enthralled despite the gravity of their situation. Corvus accepted, believing his Alpha dominance would easily overcome what he considered mere superstition. But spiritual combat operates by different rules. When their energies met, Selene revealed the darkness in his soul, his fear that without absolute power, he was nothing, his rage that others possessed gifts he could never attain. Eleanor's voice dropped lower, taking on the cadence of a ritual telling. Facing his true self broke something in Corvus. In blind fury, he struck Selene down with a physical blow, violating the terms of spiritual combat. With her dying breath, she bound his bloodline to the very darkness he had revealed. The beast within that all Alphas control through will and training would grow stronger with each generation, eventually consuming them entirely. Morgan studied the mural, understanding dawning. So the armor-like plates, the monstrous form Alaric takes, it's the manifestation of the Alpha rage given physical form. Precisely. A curse born of broken honor, strengthened by time. Eleanor moved to the next section of the mural, showing wolves with golden auras surrounding a transformed beast. Selene knew the curse might one day destroy innocent lives beyond the royal bloodline, so she left a key, the possibility of redemption through the very tribe Corvus had sought to destroy. Only a soul wolf of pure lineage, fully awakened to their power, can transform the curse. Transform, not break? Morgan noted the distinction. The curse is too deeply embedded in the royal bloodline to simply remove. Instead, it must be reshaped, its destructive nature transmuted. Eleanor's eyes met Morgan's, steady and challenging. That is what your father discovered, why Nathan had him killed. The revelation struck like a physical blow. Morgan had suspected Nathan's involvement in her father's death, but hearing it confirmed ignited a cold fury in her core. Nathan knows what I am. He knows enough to fear you, Eleanor confirmed, as the last direct descendant of Selene herself. Morgan's breath caught. Selene was my ancestor? Through your mother's line. Elena was the last known carrier of Selene's bloodline, hiding in the Northern Territories until Garrett found her during a diplomatic mission. Their union was not chance, but destiny. The weight of this heritage settled over Morgan, not just a member of a forgotten tribe, but the direct descendant of their last high priestess. The responsibility felt overwhelming, yet strangely right, like a sword crafted precisely for her hand. What must I do? She asked, resolve hardening her voice. Eleanor gestured to the silver circle inlaid in the chamber floor. Stand at the center. I will guide the ritual as far as I can, but the spiritual journey will be yours alone. As Morgan stepped into the circle, Eleanor retrieved items from a stone shelf, a silver bowl filled with clear liquid, a bundle of dried herbs, a small ceremonial dagger with a crystal hilt. Remove your father's vest, Eleanor instructed. The awakening requires the heart to be accessible to spiritual energy. Morgan complied, setting aside the blue leather vest. In her simple linen shirt, she stood at the circle's center, feeling a subtle vibration rising through the floor into her feet, up her legs, into her core. Eleanor approached with the dagger and bowl. A drop of your blood in the waters of reflection. The bloodline awakens the bloodline. She pricked Morgan's finger, allowing a single crimson drop to fall into the clear liquid. The moment it touched the surface, the water illuminated with golden light, transforming into a luminous essence that swirled of its own accord. Eleanor began a soft chant in an ancient language, words flowing like water. She dipped the herb bundle into the glowing liquid, then used it to trace symbols on Morgan's forehead, throat, and over her heart. Each touch left a trail of golden light that did not fade, but seemed to sink beneath her skin. "The pathways are opened," Eleanor murmured. "The barriers thinned. Now drink." She offered the bowl. Morgan hesitated only a moment before bringing it to her lips. The liquid tasted of moonlight and mountain streams, ancient forests and new spring growth, flavors impossible, yet undeniable. As she swallowed, warmth radiated from her core outward, intensifying until her skin felt alight with invisible flame. The chamber around her began to blur. Eleanor's form became translucent, the stone walls permeable. Morgan felt herself expanding beyond physical constraints, consciousness stretching toward dimensions previously unsensed. "Find your soul wolf," Eleanor's voice echoed, increasingly distant. "Trust what you see. Return with the dawn." The chamber dissolved completely. Morgan found herself in a twilight forest unlike any in the physical territories. Trees towered hundreds of feet overhead, their trunks wider than Ravenclaw's towers. Silver mist curled around gnarled roots thicker than a man's body. No wind stirred the ancient branches, yet movement flowed through the forest like breath through lungs. This was the spirit realm, the place between places, where energies existed in their pure form before manifesting in the physical world. Morgan took a tentative step forward, discovering that movement here followed thought more than physical effort. The forest responded to her presence, illuminating a path with soft blue foxfire that bloomed along the ground before her feet. "Follow," whispered a voice like rustling leaves. She obeyed, moving deeper into the primal forest. The path wound through impossible landscapes, trees growing sideways, waterfalls flowing upward, clearings where multiple moons hung in the sky, each a different phase and color. Time held no meaning here. Morgan walked for what might have been minutes or centuries, guided by the foxfire path, until she reached a perfect circular clearing. At its center stood a pool of water so still it reflected the starry sky above like a flawless mirror. "Look," urged the rustling voice. Morgan approached the pool's edge, gazing into its depths. Instead of her reflection, she saw scenes from her life, her childhood at Silvermoon, training secretly with her father, enduring Nathan's cruelty after Garrett's death, the years of isolation and rejection. But the pool showed more than memory. It revealed what had been hidden from her conscious mind, her father's subtle lessons in soul wolf tradition disguised as games, the protective wards he had placed around her, activated by her mother's pendant. The countless times her dormant abilities had manifested without her understanding, calming those in pain, sensing emotions others concealed. The scenes shifted, showing her mother, a woman with fierce green eyes and a gentle smile, whom Morgan barely remembered. Elena demonstrating secret rituals to Garrett, teaching him how to recognize the signs in their daughter, making him promise to protect her legacy. "They prepared you," the voice said, clearer now, emanating from the pool itself. "Even in death, they guide your path." The water's surface rippled, images dissolving. In their place appeared a magnificent wolf, unlike any Morgan had seen in the physical realm. Its fur shimmered with golden light, its eyes the same green as Morgan's own. It was not large by wolf standards, but it radiated a power that transcended physical strength, ancient wisdom, boundless compassion, unbreakable will. "My soul wolf," Morgan whispered, understanding without being told. The wolf inclined its head, acknowledging the truth. This was not a beast separate from herself, not a second consciousness as conventional wolves experienced. This was the purest expression of her own soul, the form her spiritual energy took in this realm. Morgan knelt at the pool's edge, extending her hand toward the surface. The golden wolf mirrored her movement. As their fingers and paw touched at the water's surface, reality fractured. Morgan gasped as knowledge flooded her consciousness. Centuries of soul wolf tradition, techniques for healing spiritual wounds, methods for communicating across vast distances, rituals for binding and unbinding energies. the accumulated wisdom of generations compressed into moments of pure understanding. With knowledge came power, her dormant abilities awakening fully. Morgan felt the golden energy that had manifested weakly before now coursing through her entire being, no longer foreign, but an integral part of herself. The wolf's eyes held hers. "We were never separate," it communicated without words, only unrecognized. "Why couldn't I hear you before?" Morgan asked. "Why the silence when others heard their wolves from childhood?" Soul wolves speak differently, not with words but with intuition, empathy, the spaces between thoughts. You always heard me in the calm you brought to others, in your resilience against those who sought to break you, in your instinctive understanding of pain. The wolf rose from his pool, its form solidifying as it stepped onto the shore, standing before Morgan. Up close, its fur contained intricate patterns, shifting symbols similar to those carved in the ritual chamber. "Now we must complete the union," the wolf continued, the physical and spiritual fully aligned for the task ahead. "Transforming Alaric's curse," Morgan acknowledged. "More than the king's curse is at stake." The wolf's expression grew solemn. "Forces move against the balance of the territories. The assassination attempt was merely the beginning. Ancient powers stir that would plunge the packs into endless war." Before Morgan could question further, the wolf pressed its forehead against hers. Contact became communion. The remaining barriers between them dissolved as Morgan accepted this aspect of herself completely, integrating the power and knowledge into her conscious mind. Light enveloped them, golden and blinding. When it faded, only Morgan remained, transformed. She wore the same physical form, but her perception had expanded exponentially. She could sense the energies flowing through the spirit realm, could see the connections between all living things, could feel the pulse of the physical world even from this separate dimension. The path of foxfire reappeared, leading away from the pool. "Return," whispered the forest itself. "Time grows short." Morgan followed the path, moving with new confidence through the impossible landscape. As she walked, the twilight forest began to thin, reality becoming more solid around her. The massive trees receded, the silver mist dissipated, and the multiple moons consolidated into a single blood-red orb hanging low in the sky. The blood moon. The ritual had worked. She had found her soul wolf, integrated its power and knowledge, and returned to the physical realm changed. Morgan opened her eyes to find herself still standing in the silver circle in the Chamber of Awakening. Eleanor knelt nearby, exhaustion evident in her slumped shoulders. The old woman looked up, gasping at what she saw. "Celine's blood," she whispered. "You've done it." Morgan looked down at her hands, seeing the golden energy now visible even in the physical realm, flowing beneath her skin like luminous rivers. She could sense Eleanor's life force, the ancient priestess's fading strength, the residual energies of countless rituals performed in this chamber over centuries. "How long was I gone?" Morgan asked, her voice carrying new resonance. "Hours. The blood moon reaches its zenith." Eleanor struggled to her feet, age finally catching up to her resilient spirit. "We must hurry. While you journeyed, events above have deteriorated rapidly." She gestured to Morgan's discarded vest. "Dress. I will explain as we ascend." As Morgan donned the vest, Eleanor continued. "The poison in the king advances faster than anticipated. He's been locked in the royal chambers, but the transformation accelerates. General Magnus has positioned guards throughout the fortress, preparing for the worst. And the court, the other alphas? Divided. Some call for immediate action, execution before the transformation completes. Others, primarily Lady Freya, argue for restraint, for seeking alternatives." Eleanor's expression darkened. "Lord Declan leads those demanding the king's death. He has already sent messengers to the territories, positioning himself as the voice of reason in a crisis." Morgan absorbed this information with her newly expanded awareness, seeing the political maneuverings for what they were, carefully orchestrated steps in a plan long in the making. "The assassination attempt wasn't random," she concluded. "The poisoned arrow, the specific corruption agent, Declan arranged it all." "So I believe," Eleanor confirmed. "Though proof remains elusive, what matters now is the king's condition. If you truly intend to attempt transformation of the curse, it must be done before his humanity is completely subsumed." They ascended from his hidden chambers, emerging into the ancient library. Even here, far below the fortress proper, Morgan could sense the tension permeating the structure above: fear, anger, ambition, all churning in a volatile mixture that threatened imminent explosion. As they hurried through the fortress corridors, Morgan noted the increased guard presence, the strategic positioning at key junctions. Magnus was preparing not just for the king's potential rampage, but for attempted coups as well. They encountered Daniel at the base of the North Tower. The young beta's eyes widened at Morgan's transformed appearance, the subtle golden luminescence visible beneath her skin, the new authority in her bearing. "The king asks for you," he said without preamble. "His condition worsens by the minute. Magnus ordered no visitors, but—" He hesitated. "Alaric insists that only you can help him now." Eleanor gripped Morgan's arm. "Be cautious. The curse fights for survival. It will resist transformation with everything it has." Morgan nodded, understanding the danger. "Stay with Eleanor," she instructed Daniel. "Keep her safe. There are forces at work beyond politics." Without waiting for a response, Morgan ascended the tower stairs, her enhanced senses guiding her toward Alaric. She could feel his energy, a chaotic storm of crimson and black, pulsing with ancient malice, growing stronger with each passing moment. The royal chambers occupied the tower's top floor, a suite of rooms now guarded by Magnus himself and 4 elite soldiers. The general's expression revealed his surprise at Morgan's approach. "Miss Reed, I have orders to admit no one. Yet the king himself has requested my presence," Morgan countered, meeting his gaze steadily. Magnus studied her, noting the changes apparent even to conventional perception. "What happened to you in those chambers below?" "I've claimed my birthright," Morgan answered simply. "Now I must help the king claim his." Something in her voice, authority without arrogance, conviction without fanaticism, made the hardened warrior step aside. "Be careful," he warned. "He's not himself. The transformation progresses rapidly." Beyond the outer door lay the king's antechamber, furnished with maps and strategic models, emblems of the 7 territories mounted on the walls. The inner door to the bedchamber stood ajar, allowing Morgan to sense the turbulent energies within. She stepped through without hesitation, closing the door firmly behind her. The scene before her would have terrified her former self. Alaric knelt in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the shattered remains of furniture. His body convulsed between human and monstrous forms, the black armor-like plates now covering most of his torso, one arm completely transformed into a massive clawed appendage. His face shifted continuously, features elongating then receding, eyes flashing between stormy gray and blood red. When he saw her, a moment of clarity brought his human aspect to the surface. "Morgan," he gasped, his voice a ragged shadow of its former resonance. "You shouldn't be here. Not safe." Morgan approached steadily, her golden energy brightening in response to the curse's darkness. "I know what I am now," she said. "What you are. What we must do." Alaric struggled visibly against the transformation, sweat beading on his contorted features. "The curse. Too strong. Poison accelerated. Everything." "I know about the curse's origin," Morgan told him, moving closer despite the danger his transformed state presented. "About Corvus and Selene, the broken honor oath, the price of spiritual violation." His eyes widened, momentarily holding their natural gray. "Then you know, no cure, only death, prevents the beast's freedom." Morgan knelt before him, just beyond arm's reach. "Not death. Transformation. The curse cannot be broken, but it can be reshaped. That's what my father discovered, why Nathan had him killed." A spasm racked Alaric's frame, the armor plate spreading further across his chest. "How?" he managed through clenched teeth. "The curse was born of rejection. Corvus refusing to acknowledge the darkness within himself, projecting it outward, violating the terms of spiritual combat. For generations, your bloodline has fought against it, treating it as separate, as enemy." Morgan's voice remained steady, her golden energy pulsing stronger. "But fighting only makes it stronger. The true path lies in acceptance and integration." Alaric shook his head, fighting another wave of transformation. "Accept this?" He raised his monstrous arm, claws flexing involuntarily. "This corruption?" "Not corruption. Shadow. Your own shadow, magnified by the curse, given physical form." Morgan edged closer, the golden energy around her hands intensifying. Every alpha balances on the knife's edge between control and rage, between civilization and primal instinct. The curse simply makes manifest what already exists within. Understanding dawned in Alaric's eyes, quickly followed by denial. "No, I'm not this monster." "Part of you is," Morgan countered gently, "as part of every alpha is. The curse doesn't create darkness. It amplifies what lies dormant in all wolves, the capacity for destruction, for dominance at any cost." Another convulsion shook Alaric's frame. The black plates crept up his neck, beginning to spread across his jaw. His time as a conscious entity diminished with each passing moment. "I can help you," Morgan said, moving within arm's reach now, a dangerous position should the beast aspect gain control. "But you must trust me completely, and you must be willing to face your own darkness without flinching." Alaric met her gaze, desperation and determination warring in his expression. "What must I do?" "Let me in." Morgan extended her hands, golden energy now visibly swirling around her fingers. "Not just physically, but mentally, spiritually. I must create a bridge between us, guide you through the integration, as Selene should have guided Corvus." For a moment, doubt clouded Alaric's features. To allow such vulnerability went against everything alpha instinct demanded. To open himself completely to another being required a trust foreign to his nature. Then, with visible effort, he nodded once. "Do it." Morgan placed her palms against his chest, directly over his heart. The contact completed a circuit more profound than their previous connections. This time, with her soul wolf fully awakened, Morgan could create not just a temporary calming influence, but a true spiritual bridge. Golden light flowed from her hands into Alaric's transformed body, meeting immediate resistance from the curse's darkness. Morgan closed her eyes, focusing her consciousness on creating the pathway between them. Reality shifted. They stood together in a twilight realm similar to the spirit forest Morgan had traversed, but darker, twisted. Massive trees grew at impossible angles, their bark blackened as if by fire. The ground beneath their feet pulsed like a living heart, veins of crimson running through charred earth. "My mindscape," Alaric realized, looking around with horror. "This is how the curse has reshaped my inner world." Morgan took his hand. Here in this realm, they both appeared in human form, though Alaric's skin bore shadowy patterns where the armor plates manifested physically. "This is only the surface. We must go deeper, to where the curse first took root in your bloodline." She led him along a path that appeared beneath their feet, golden light pushing back the oppressive shadows. As they walked, the landscape shifted subtly, timelines blending. They glimpsed fragments of memories, not just Alaric's, but those of his ancestors, echoes preserved within the family bloodline. A young Alaric training with his father, the previous Alpha King, learning to control his strength and temper. An adolescent Alaric experiencing his first shift, the exhilaration and terror of the wolf's power coursing through his veins. Alaric as a young man, kneeling beside his father's deathbed, accepting the silver circlet and the burden it represented. Deeper still, memories not his own, his father's reign, his grandfather's, generations of stone kings struggling against the growing darkness within. Each successive ruler fought the curse differently, some through rigid discipline, others through spiritual practices, a few through bloodshed and conquest that temporarily satisfied the beast's hunger for dominance. Finally, they reached the core, a massive black heartstone pulsing in a cavern deep beneath the twisted mindscape. Atop the stone stood a figure both familiar and alien, Corvus Stone, the first Alpha King, his form half transformed like Alaric's physical state, armor plates covering most of his body. Behind him lay the faded image of a woman in ceremonial robes, blood pooling beneath her still form. "Selene," Morgan whispered, recognizing her ancestor from the spiritual knowledge she had gained. Corvus snarled, crimson eyes fixed on them with primal hatred. "Leave this place. The bloodline is mine." Morgan stepped forward, golden energy swirling around her form. "I am Selene's descendant. I come to finish what began 2 centuries ago." The ancestral figure growled, the sound echoing through the cavern. "Her bloodline was destroyed. I made certain of it." "Not all," Morgan countered. "One line remained, hidden in the northern territories. My mother's line, direct from Selene herself." Fury contorted Corvus's features. "Then you too shall die." He lunged with impossible speed, claws extended toward Morgan's throat. Alaric moved to intercept, but Morgan raised her hand, stopping him with a gesture. As Corvus reached her, his claws met a barrier of golden light. His momentum halted as if he'd struck solid stone. "I am not here to fight you," Morgan stated calmly, "nor to destroy you. That was your error, Corvus Stone, believing that domination meant elimination of the other." She turned to Alaric, who watched the confrontation with stunned expression. This is the curse's origin point, not just Celine's dying curse, but Corvus's refusal to integrate the shadow she revealed within him. Each generation since has followed the same pattern, treating the beast as enemy rather than aspect. Understanding dawned in Alaric's eyes. "We fight what we fear within ourselves, and in fighting give it greater power," Morgan confirmed. She faced Corvus again. "You are not separate from Alaric. You are the accumulated shadow of his bloodline, the aspects each generation rejected rather than integrated. The primal strength, the instinctive dominance, the capacity for necessary violence." Corvus snarled, circling her barrier. "I am the true alpha nature. These weaklings who wear the crown have diluted our strength with their so-called civilization." "Strength without wisdom destroys itself," Morgan countered. "Power without compassion becomes tyranny. You are not complete without the aspects you despise, just as they are not whole without you." She turned to Alaric. "The transformation requires both parties' willing participation. You must accept this aspect of yourself, not surrender to it, but integrate it. See the beast not as curse, but as the primal foundation upon which true strength is built." Alaric stared at his ancestral shadow, conflict evident in his expression. "If I accept this creature, what becomes of me, of my consciousness, my control?" "You become more fully yourself," Morgan answered. "The energy wasted in constant internal battle redirected to true kingship. The curse transforms from parasite to symbiote." Corvus laughed, a chilling sound. "Pretty words. The moment he drops his guard, I will consume him entirely." "That's where I come in," Morgan said, her golden energy brightening. "As Celine should have done for you, Corvus, had you not broken the spiritual combat's terms. I will guide the integration, ensure neither aspect dominates the other." She extended her hands, one toward Alaric, one toward Corvus. "Both must consent. Both must participate willingly. That is the only path to transformation." Alaric hesitated, centuries of ingrained resistance warring with desperate need. Then, with the courage that had made him king, he reached for Morgan's offered hand. "I consent," Corvus growled, pacing the perimeter of Morgan's barrier. "And if I refuse? If I choose to fight until his consciousness fades completely? Then you gain temporary victory, but eventual defeat," Morgan replied evenly. "Without Alaric's human aspect, the other alphas will unite against you. You will be hunted and destroyed, the bloodline ended. The curse will die with its final host." The ancestral shadow considered this, calculating. Morgan could sense the ancient intelligence beneath the bestial rage. The curse had accumulated wisdom along with power through the generations. Finally, Corvus extended one clawed hand. "I consent, but know this, Celine's daughter. If the integration fails, if your power proves insufficient, I will take you both." Morgan nodded, accepting the risk. As their hands connected, the cavern filled with blinding light. Golden from Morgan, crimson from Corvus, stormy gray from Alaric. The energies swirled together, forming a vortex with the three of them at its center. Morgan channeled her soul wolf power, creating a spiritual framework for the integration, not elimination of either aspect, but harmonization. The process tore through her consciousness like fire, testing the limits of her newly awakened abilities. This was magic of the highest order, soulcraft that few even among the Lunar Fall tribe had mastered. Alaric cried out as his consciousness began merging with the ancestral shadow, centuries of separated existence reforming into a unified whole. Corvus roared, his bestial form shifting, the armor plates flowing like liquid metal, reshaping rather than dissolving. The heartstone beneath them cracked, black energy pouring from its fissures. The entire mindscape shuddered, trees uprooting, ground splitting. The curse fought the transformation with all its accumulated power, recognizing an existential threat to its separated existence. Morgan maintained the framework through sheer will, her golden energy forming a protective sphere around the integration point. Within this space, something new took shape, neither fully human nor fully beast, but a harmonious integration of both aspects. The vortex intensified, light too bright to witness directly. Then, with a final surge of power that drained Morgan to her spiritual foundations, the transformation completed. The vortex collapsed, the shattered landscape stilled, and the three merged into two, Morgan and a transformed Alaric. He stood before her, his form stabilized into something magnificent. No longer shifting between human and monstrous aspects, he had integrated both into a new whole. The armor plates remained, but had transformed from chaotic corruption to structured protection, covering strategic points on his torso and limbs. His features held both human intellect and primal power, eyes neither fully gray nor red, but a striking silver with subtle crimson highlights. "How do you feel?" Morgan asked, her own form flickering with exhaustion. Alaric examined himself, flexing transformed hands that bore claws, yet maintained human dexterity. "Complete," he answered, his voice deeper than before but fully articulate. The constant battle within, silenced, replaced by alliance. Morgan smiled, sensing the truth of his words. The integration had succeeded. The curse hadn't been broken. Such power, once created, could not simply be unmade. But it had been transformed from parasite to symbiote, from corrupting influence to enhancing adaptation. "It's time to return," she said, extending her hand once more. "Your kingdom needs its king." Together they ascended through the layers of Mindscape, leaving behind the shattered Heartstone and the Cavern of Origins. As they approached the surface, the twisted landscape had already begun to heal, blackened trees sprouting new growth, charred earth revealing green shoots beneath. Reality shifted again. Morgan gasped as her consciousness snapped back into her physical body. She remained kneeling before Alaric in the royal chambers, her hands still pressed to his chest. The golden energy faded, her power temporarily exhausted by the monumental spiritual working. Alaric opened his eyes, silver now, with subtle crimson highlights that would mark him forever as changed. The transformation had affected his physical form as well. The chaotic black armor plates had restructured, forming a symbiotic second skin that covered his torso in a pattern resembling ceremonial armor, leaving his arms and face fully human. He stood straighter, the burden of constant internal struggle lifted from his shoulders. "It worked," he said, wonder in his voice. "The rage remains, but channeled, controlled, the beast aspect integrated rather than fought." Morgan nodded, swaying slightly with exhaustion. "The curse is transformed, not broken. You will never be as you were before, but you need not fear losing control again." Alaric caught her as she stumbled, supporting her weight easily with his enhanced strength. "You've done what generations thought impossible," he said, genuine awe in his voice. "Celine's final revenge, delivered through her descendant. Not destruction, but transformation." Before Morgan could respond, the chamber door burst open. General Magnus stood in the threshold, sword drawn, flanked by royal guards with weapons ready. Behind them, Lord Declan watched with narrowed eyes, clearly expecting to find a rampaging beast requiring immediate execution. Instead, they beheld their transformed king supporting an exhausted Morgan, both clearly conscious and in control. Magnus lowered his sword slowly, confusion evident on his scarred features. "Your Majesty?" Alaric straightened to his full height, the symbiotic armor gleaming in the chamber's torchlight. "The crisis has passed, General. The curse is managed." Declan pushed forward, his calculating gaze assessing the transformation. "Managed? You appear more beast than man, Your Majesty. How can the court be certain you won't lose control at any moment?" "The integration is complete," Morgan stated, finding strength to stand unsupported. "The king's consciousness remains dominant, the beast aspect fully incorporated rather than fighting for control." Suspicion lingered in Declan's expression. "Convenient claims from the woman who supposedly worked this miracle. The territories will require more concrete assurances before accepting a transformed monarch." Alaric's silver eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained measured. "The Blood Moon Festival continues. We will address the court and the territorial representatives in the Great Hall in 1 hour. There, all questions will be answered." His tone left no room for argument. Even transformed, his royal authority remained absolute. Declan bowed, though the gesture lacked sincerity, and withdrew. Magnus hesitated, loyalty warring with understandable caution. "I am still myself, Magnus," Alaric assured him quietly. "More so than I have been in years, in fact." The general nodded slowly. The court assembles as we speak, Your Majesty. Lady Freya has maintained order among the Alphas, but tensions run high. Lord Declan's faction grows bolder by the hour. Then we shall not delay, Alaric decided. He turned to Morgan. You should rest. The spiritual working has drained you considerably. Morgan shook her head. My place is at your side when you address the court. They must see that the Lunar Fall bloodline stands with the throne, that the ancient conflict has found resolution through alliance rather than domination. Alaric studied her with newfound perception, his transformed senses allowing him to see the golden energy still flowing beneath her skin, though diminished by her exertion. You risked everything, he said softly. Your consciousness, your very existence. As did you, she replied simply. Something passed between them in that moment, understanding deeper than words, connection forged through shared spiritual transformation. In the mindscape, their energies had intertwined, creating bonds that transcended conventional relationships. Magnus cleared his throat, professional decorum reasserting itself. I'll have servants bring appropriate attire, Your Majesty. The court should see you at your most regal. As Magnus withdrew to make arrangements, Morgan and Alaric were left alone once more. The transformed king moved to the chamber windows, looking out over his fortress and the territories beyond, silver eyes reflecting the blood moon's crimson light. Everything changes tonight, he said quietly. The curse's transformation marks only the beginning. Lord Declan's faction will not surrender their ambitions easily. Nathan will view your emergence as existential threat. The balance of power throughout the territories shifts with each passing hour. Morgan joined him at the window, sensing the truth in his assessment. My father knew this day would come. That's why he trained me, prepared me, even when I didn't understand why. Alaric turned to her, his expression solemn. Garrett Reed was the finest man I ever knew. Loyal beyond measure, wise beyond his years. He saw the patterns forming long before others, recognized the threat beneath the surface politics. His voice lowered. He would be proud of you tonight. Morgan felt unexpected tears sting her eyes at these words, simple acknowledgement of the father she had lost, the legacy she now carried. She had spent years believing herself broken, incomplete, only to discover she had been something else entirely, something rare and valuable, a heritage preserved through generations of careful planning. We should prepare, she said, composing herself. The court awaits its king. An hour later, Morgan stood beside Alaric at the entrance to Ravenclaw's Great Hall. The transformed king wore ceremonial armor that incorporated rather than concealed his symbiotic plates, the silver circlet gleaming against his black hair. Morgan had changed into a gown of midnight blue, embroidered with silver moons. Eleanor's doing, a subtle declaration of her lunar fall heritage. The hall beyond the massive doors hummed with hundreds of voices, the assembled court, territorial representatives, visiting alphas. News of the king's transformation had spread throughout the fortress, though details remained confused and often contradictory. Some claimed he had been cured by mysterious magic, others that he had conquered the beast through sheer alpha will. Still others whispered darker theories, that the king had died and been replaced, or that Morgan had somehow ensorcelled him for her own purposes. They fear what they don't understand, Alaric observed, sensing her tension. That has always been the way of our kind. And those who fear most deeply often strike most violently, Morgan replied, thinking of Nathan, of Lord Declan, of all who would see the knight's transformation as threat rather than salvation. Alaric nodded grimly. Which is why we must present strength beyond questioning. He offered his arm, a gesture both courtly and symbolic. Together, Morgan Reed, Celene's descendant and Corvus's heir, united where our ancestors fought, the cycle broken at last. Morgan placed her hand on his arm, feeling the symbiotic armor warm and responsive beneath her touch. United, she agreed. The great doors swung open. Silence fell instantly as the transformed king and the soul wolf healer entered the hall. Hundreds of eyes tracked their progress toward the dais, murmurs rising and falling like tide against shore. Lady Freya stood in the front of the gathered alphas, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Lord Declan had positioned himself prominently among his faction, carefully gauging the court's reaction. And standing near the hall's entrance, having arrived during the crisis, Nathan Blackwood, his face a mask of controlled fury as he beheld his supposedly broken cousin walking beside the transformed Alpha King. Alaric ascended the dais, Morgan at his side. Instead of taking his throne, he remained standing, addressing the assembly directly. "Tonight marks a turning point in our history," he began, his voice stronger than ever, carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "The curse that has shadowed the royal bloodline for centuries has been not broken, but transformed. Through the ancient wisdom of the Lunar Fall tribe, preserved through generations and wielded by Morgan Reed, last descendant of High Priestess Selene, I stand before you neither man nor beast, but both in harmony." Murmurs intensified at this revelation. Many present were old enough to remember the historical accounts of the Night Eclipse War, though few knew the true causes or consequences. "Some will view this transformation with fear," Alaric continued, "others with suspicion. I ask only that you judge by actions, not appearances. The peace between our territories remains my sacred duty, the prosperity of all packs, my unwavering goal." He gestured to Morgan. "For centuries, Alphas believed strength came only through dominance, through subjugation of the weak. Tonight proves otherwise. True power emerges from alliance, from integration of apparent opposites. The Alpha King and the Soul Wolf Healer, together establishing a new foundation for our future." Lord Declan stepped forward, his smooth voice cutting through the murmurs. "Stirring words, Your Majesty. Yet questions remain. This transformation appears to have left you altered. The territories deserve assurance that your judgment remains unclouded, your priorities unchanged." The challenge hung in the air, skillfully crafted to sound reasonable while planting seeds of doubt. Morgan sensed Declan's true purpose, to position himself as voice of caution, protector of tradition, while undermining Alaric's authority. Before Alaric could respond, Lady Freya moved to stand before the dais. The female Alpha's silver armor gleamed in the hall's torchlight as she addressed not the king, but the assembled court. "I witnessed the king take a poisoned arrow meant for me during today's hunt," she declared, her voice clear and commanding. "An arrow that triggered his transformation prematurely. An arrow that should have killed any normal wolf. Yet he stands before us now, in control and clear-minded." Her gaze swept the assembly, challenging. Who benefits most from such an assassination attempt? Who has positioned themselves to seize power should the king fall? All eyes turned to Lord Declan, whose composed expression showed the first hints of strain. "You overstep, Lady Freya. I have served the crown faithfully for decades." "Indeed," Freya replied coldly. Always nearby as the curse worsened, always whispering of succession plans should the king's condition deteriorate, always with a solution that places you at the center of power. Morgan watched the confrontation unfold, sensing the delicate political balance shifting. Freya had not declared outright loyalty to the transformed king, but by challenging his most prominent opponent, she had effectively chosen sides. Nathan pushed through the crowd, unable to contain himself any longer. "This goes beyond politics," he snarled, pointing at Morgan. "My cousin is no healer, no descendant of ancient bloodlines. She is a wolfless aberration, a shame upon the Reed name." Alaric's silver eyes fixed on Nathan with dangerous intensity. "Choose your next words with exceptional care, Alpha Blackwood. You stand before the woman who saved not just your king, but potentially thousands of innocent lives." Nathan's face contorted with barely controlled rage. "She has bewitched you, Majesty, as her mother bewitched her father. The northern bloodlines have always dabbled in forbidden arts, in magics beyond natural wolf abilities." "You speak of things you cannot comprehend," Morgan said, stepping forward. Her exhaustion receded as righteous anger flowed through her. "My father knew what I was, what I might become. That knowledge signed his death warrant at your hand." Gasps echoed through the hall. To accuse an alpha of kinslaying, the most forbidden crime in wolf society, required absolute certainty. "Lies!" Nathan's eyes flashed amber as his control slipped. "Garrett Reed died in a hunting accident. All investigations confirmed this." "Investigations conducted under your authority, with evidence you controlled," Morgan countered. "My father discovered my heritage shortly before his death. He knew I carried the Lunar Fall bloodline through my mother, and he knew you would never allow such power to exist within your pack, threatening your absolute control." Nathan's composure cracked further. Even if such fairy tales were true, the Lunar Fall were exterminated for good reason. Their unnatural abilities undermined the natural order, threatened alpha authority with powers no true wolf should possess. Alaric's voice cut through the growing tension. "You reveal yourself, Nathan Blackwood. Your fear of powers beyond your comprehension, your willingness to kill your own blood to maintain control, your rejection of evolution itself, these mark you unworthy of alpha status." The formal condemnation silenced the hall completely. Such judgment from the Alpha King carried profound weight in wolf society. Nathan stared in shock, realizing too late the depth of his self-incrimination. "The king speaks truly," Lady Freya declared, her support now explicit. "The Silver Moon Pack deserves leadership that embraces strength in all its forms, not merely the brute dominance of outdated alpha traditions." Other alphas nodded in agreement, the tide turning visibly against Nathan. Lord Declan remained silent, calculating his options as his primary ally self-destructed before the court. Alaric descended from the dais, his transformed presence commanding absolute attention. "Nathan Blackwood, you are hereby stripped of alpha status. The Silver Moon Pack shall hold selection rights for new leadership." He turned to Morgan. "As ranking Reed by blood, you have claim to participate in those rights, should you choose." The pronouncement struck Morgan like physical impact. Her compete for alpha status? A supposed wolfless Omega, now revealed as Soul Wolf Healer, returning to claim leadership of the pack that had rejected and humiliated her for years? Nathan's control shattered completely. With a roar of rage, he partially shifted, teeth elongating, claws extending from human fingers. He lunged not at Alaric, but at Morgan, seeing in her the embodiment of his downfall. The attack happened too quickly for guards to intercept, yet Alaric moved with impossible speed, his transformed reflexes surpassing even alpha capabilities. He caught Nathan mid-lunge, transformed hand closing around the disgraced alpha's throat. "Your final mistake," Alaric growled, silver eyes flashing crimson. Morgan placed a restraining hand on Alaric's arm. "Not like this," she said quietly. "Not execution before the court. Justice, not vengeance, marks the difference between king and tyrant." For a moment, the beast aspect of Alaric's integrated nature flared, ancestral rage demanding bloodshed. Then his silver eyes cleared, balance restored between aspects. He released Nathan, who collapsed to the floor, gasping. "Take him to the holding cells," Alaric ordered the royal guards. "He will face formal justice for the murder of Garrett Reed, with all evidence properly examined." He addressed the stunned court as Nathan was dragged away. "Let it be known that even in transformation, the Crown's commitment to justice remains absolute. Strength without mercy is merely brutality. Power without restraint leads only to destruction." The declaration resonated through the Great Hall, setting the tone for the new era dawning with this blood moon. As the guards removed Nathan, Morgan noticed Lord Declan slipping quietly from the assembly, his carefully constructed power base crumbling with each passing minute. Lady Freya approached the dais, kneeling before Alaric in formal acknowledgement of his continued authority, transformed appearance notwithstanding. "The Eclipse Pack stands with the Crown, Your Majesty, as I believe all packs who value true strength will do." One by one, the territorial alphas followed her lead, pledging loyalty to the transformed king. Each commitment solidified the new reality. The curse transformed, ancient conflicts resolved through integration rather than elimination. Soul Wolf and Alpha bloodlines united where once they had fought to mutual destruction. As the formal acknowledgments concluded, Alaric returned to the dais, taking his throne with Morgan standing at his right hand. The symbolism was lost on no one present, the traditional position of chief advisor, royal consort, or chosen successor. "The Blood Moon Festival continues," Alaric announced. "Tonight we have witnessed transformation, justice, and renewal. Let us move forward not in fear of change, but in embracing evolution, of ourselves, our packs, our very understanding of strength and leadership." The court began to disperse, conversations erupting throughout the hall as wolves processed the night's monumental events. Morgan felt the weight of countless stares, some admiring, others wary, many simply curious about the supposed wolfless Omega, now revealed as something far more significant. Alaric leaned toward her, speaking for her ears alone. "This is only the beginning. Nathan's removal creates opportunity, but also power vacuum. Lord Declan remains dangerous, perhaps more so in retreat. The territories will watch closely how we proceed from here." Morgan nodded, understanding the complex political landscape stretching before them. "My father prepared me for many things, but not for this, standing beside the throne, visible to all." "Is that where you wish to be?" Alaric asked, surprising her with the directness of the question. "Beside the throne?" The Soul Wolf healer could claim her own path, build her own legacy separate from royal politics. Morgan considered this possibility, returning to Silver Moon perhaps, helping rebuild the pack under new leadership, or establishing a sanctuary for others like herself, wolves whose gifts manifested differently from tradition. The choices before her seemed suddenly boundless, where once her future had appeared hopelessly constrained. "Tonight is not the time for such decisions," she answered carefully. "The transformation has drained us both. Recovery and reflection must come before new commitments." Alaric's silver eyes studied her with newfound perception. Wise counsel, as expected from Celine's descendant. He stood, offering his arm once more. "Come, we have upheld tradition and duty before the court. Now we must see to our own needs, rest, recovery, and private counsel regarding the path ahead." As they departed the great hall together, Morgan felt the weight of possibility settling upon her shoulders. Not a burden, but a mantle, a legacy finally claimed after years of suppression and denial. Whatever path she chose from this moment forward, it would be with full knowledge of her heritage, her power, her true nature, as neither broken nor incomplete, but rare and valuable beyond measure. Outside the windows of Ravenclaw Fortress, the blood moon began its descent, its crimson light giving way to the first hints of dawn. A new day approached, for Morgan Reed, for Alaric Stone, for the 7 territories whose future had been irrevocably altered by the night's transformation. The cycle broken, the curse transformed, ancient enemies united where once they had sought mutual destruction. As the first rays of sunlight touched the fortress towers, they illuminated not an ending, but a beginning, a world of possibilities written not in blood, but in the golden light of healing and the silver reflection of integrated strength.